Okay. Right, so we're sharing our screen now, and we've also started the recording. So fingers crossed you can all see the PowerPoint.
Great. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for joining us for session 4. Before we start today, just a quick reminder, in this session you are going to be referring to your Learning Log 4.1, so I'm hoping that you either have that accessible on your desktop or that you have that as a paper copy. In addition, we're also going to refer to the case study from session 3. The title of that one was How Does Talk Around Reading Influence Comprehension in Grade 3? And again, as long as you either have web access to that or the paper copy of that, we're going to be referring to both of those later on in the session. So our research question today for session 4 is, how will I use research to inform my action research? And this is getting at the question of how do you make that leap from all of the different pieces of research that you've found to using that research to inform the design of your action research project. And of course, one of the things that we had encouraged you to do after session 3 was to go back and revisit your research question and to confirm that your research question still was valid, or if you needed to adjust it or change it, that you would adjust it and change it as we go through. Next week, we're going to be looking at the data collection methods that you might use to carry out your project. So again, the two things that are very, very important at this time, or to have prior to coming on to session 5, are going to be a research question that you're comfortable with and a little bit of an idea about some of the background research around your topic. Again, as part of this online course, you're not going to be writing a full literature review. You are not going to be doing a comprehensive search of the literature. Although I know that from emails and having spoken to a couple of you that you actually plan to carry out this project, and some of you may have done that. But again, as part of this course, that's not our expectation that you will do that. So when we come back on the 14th of April, which is in about 2 weeks' time, we're going to be looking at data collection methods, and we'll tell you a little bit more about the preparation for that at the end of this webinar. But to get us started today, and again, to make sure that everyone's equipment is working properly, we have an opening question. And in your chat box, could you please just go ahead and type in, what are you looking forward to during spring break?
Dawn is moving into West Hampstead. Denise is going somewhere nice. She's looking forward to an ocean breeze and long walks.
Will that be at Brighton?
Okay, Dee's trekking in Morocco with 8th graders.
Gabby's off to Korea.
Yeah. Oh, Louise is going to Sri Lanka. Missed anyone? Oh, Lisa's going home to her parents to let them take care of her. Tommy's taken a week to catch up on everything he's been meaning to do since September. I know the feeling. And Jane's off to Ireland. And Simon's just rubbing it in that he's off to Italy, and I'm sure it's going to be a lot warmer there than it is here.
All right, thank you, everybody. And again, just to review who we have with us today, we have everyone today except for Shobana, who we just learned just a moment ago is not yet at home and doesn't have a working computer where she is. So when we do our paired activity today, we're going to have to improvise and kind of figure out something. I know maybe you'll pair with one of us during that. So again, everyone is here except Shobana. And I know that the last session, this session, are looking at the literature and literature reviews. But let's start out with just a really quick poll. Again, how many of you have written a literature review before? Latifa is going to launch a poll in just a moment, and if you can respond to that poll as soon as you can see it. Okay. Have you written a literature review before?
Okay,
so it looks like we have...
Okay. 36% have written a literature review before, and we've got 64% who have not.
So I'm going to make a big leap and make the assumption that those of you who have written a literature review before have probably done it as part of a master's program or a PhD program as a requirement of the course, whether it was for a project or a capstone or an actual thesis. Again, as part of this course, we're not going to actually write a full literature review, but again, what we're hoping to do is to explain the mechanics of how you would do that if you wanted to put one together. And we're, of course, now working through some of the exercises that will prepare you to do that. We're going to launch just another really quick poll, and this is as a follow-up to session 3. And we are wondering which of the tools, which of the web-based search tools did you find most useful? Latifa is going to launch the poll in just a moment, and you'll notice that we would like to know. We showed you 3, the IOE website, the ERIC website, the Google website. But if in fact you found an other more useful, if you could click other.
Right.
Great for that. We have several people that used another site. And what we would like you to do, can you please, we're gonna turn off the poll, and can you go ahead and go to the next slide? Can you raise your hand if you used another source and just tell us what that source was? So if you hold on just a moment, Latifa is opening it up. We have Dawn who's raised her hand. And we're connecting your audio. Go ahead, Dawn.
I used ERIC and EBSCOhost. I've used both of them.
Yes.
So do you have EBSCOhost through your school still?
Yes.
Okay. I know that some of the campuses had that, and there's been some discussion on whether or not it would be renewed for next year, but it's great to know that you found that useful.
Yeah, it was great.
And Denise.
Okay, go ahead, Denise. Denise?
Denise, we can't hear you if you are speaking. We have your microphone open.
Let me see. Sorry.
Oh, there you are.
No, I'm sorry. I thought my hand was down.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry about that.
That's okay, thank you. Kelly's also got a hand up. Okay, go ahead, Kelly.
Yes, I found resources in our Gale Power Search, one of the databases that all the UK campuses have as a subscription.
Okay, Gale Power Source.
Great, thank you for that.
And that's it. Thank you all very much. Oh, Dawn, did you want to say something else? Dawn?
No, sorry. I'm putting my hand back up, down.
Thank you.
All right, just as a final piece from our work on looking up articles, I was wondering if anyone had any additional questions or comments about finding articles or writing the annotated bibliographies. You practiced that as part of Learning Log 3.2 from last week. So if you have any questions or comments, if you want to raise your hand, we will call on you.
Okay.
D.
Okay, hi Dee.
Hi, yeah, I've actually completely changed my research question. Spent the last week doing that, and earlier this year I received a white paper from the company here that provides, the baby simulators. Yeah. So I wanted to use that as a piece of evidence because it reviews 15 different pieces of research into the efficacy of the program, but it doesn't have a year of publication, and it's just called the Real Care Baby Program Evidence of Efficacy with the professor who did it. Is something like that still admissible even though it doesn't follow the standard APA formatting or crediting?
No, it is admissible, and there are other ways to write the citation for that particular reference. In cases, if in fact you were working on a project that went all the way through to publication stage, what you would do is you would actually contact the publisher or the author of that paper to confirm that additional data. They may actually be able to give you that the paper may itself have a reference that you can't tell by looking at the version that you're looking at, and they can often
Right,
provide that information. So if you got all the way to that stage, you would want to do that as a part of your just part of the background research that you were doing, and to fill in all the details.
Okay.
But no, white papers that are produced by organizations are admissible, and of course you would indicate that. You would say that that's what it was in the bibliography.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yep. All right. We have another very quick task for you. I don't see any more hands. And if you could, please, in your chat box, could you write in your current research question or paraphrase it? It doesn't need to be in perfect kind of grammatical sentence style. I'm asking you to do this because next week we're going to begin talking about data, and it will just be helpful for me to kind of understand the research question that you have at this point in time so that we can tailor and customize that session to the extent that it makes sense to do that. So can you just take a moment and in your chat box, just please type in your research question as you know it today.
Just write it.
All right, thank you, everyone. We're not going to read those out because those will, again, appear in the record of the chat thread. But again, those will be very useful for us and very helpful as we begin to plan the session coming up in 2 weeks. So we're going to stay with kind of asking you questions. And in the chat box, again, if you could state how reading your articles influenced your research question. I know that some of you have just said that your research question has changed just recently. But again, in the chat box, if you could just write in a quick reflection on how finding and reading those pieces of research have influenced your research question, and if it's changed or if it stayed the same. So, who could we pair? Can they do that? Okay, send it to
Okay, the responses have started to come in. So just to kind of give you a bit of a flavour, I know that you can read them, but I think just to kind of sort of reinforce. Lisa says that she changed her research questions as she's having a difficult item finding research related to the digital related to digital resources or comparisons with other student organisations. D has stayed pretty much the same. But now she has a broad understanding of the issues. Jane has looked at some theoretical frameworks, including some articles. The deficit model perception of VAL students, and she's now reworking her question based on this. Denise says the research has definitely helped her to define her question. And Tom says, my articles detail the lack of research in the area of flipped classrooms and the outcomes of the investigation. So it's made him focus on a specific idea. And Dawn's research question has also changed. It became more focused and narrow. Okay, so there seems to be a trend here. Ruslan says the literature review only confirmed that it is unclear whether flipped learning is an effective learning approach. There's a lot of evidence that it's not effective. But however, I found that with older students, there are more studies stating that it is effective. So the literature reviews encouraged him to try this. Gaby's found out a lot of information about learning groups, about how these groups can be effective in maths classes. So, okay.
All right, everyone. Thank you for those responses. Again, an important part of the literature review process is informing this recursive action research cycle, which is important to remember is not linear. It doesn't just go in a straight line, that there are points in the process where you go back and rethink things that you've just done. And so it appears that from your responses that you're all using the literature review it very effectively to actually reframe and refine your actual research question. I think that one of the other important things to note in the literature review is that it does help you confirm that the question you're asking is not one that has an obvious answer. Part of the point of action research is not to ask questions that you already think you know the answers to, or to frame those questions so that the information you're looking for will enhance the information that is known already through other pieces of research. This is genuinely research, and the point of action research is not just to confirm that something that someone else has figured out actually works or is the same in your particular setting. So again, great job on that. I think that you all seem to be on the right track based on the kinds of feedback and responses that you've just given. We're going to move now to a paired chat, and I'm first going to give you the question, and then I'm going to show you the pairings, and then I'm going to put the question back up just as a reminder. So what I would like you to do, and you're going to do this in pairs, is that I'd like you to discuss one of the articles you summarized for your annotated bibliography, and that is that Learning Log 4.1 that I think probably all of you have in front of you right now. In your chat box, again, what I'd like you to focus on is just quickly say the title of the article, name some of the main points, and then really quickly talk about how it relates to your research question. If you are the person who's actually presenting what they have just done, the person who's receiving that information, please feel free to ask that person questions before you go on. So one person talk about the article that you found, the other person is in listening mode to begin with, but then shifts to questioning mode, and then flip roles so that the other person is presenting what they have done. As a reminder, on the bottom, you see it says type send, type send. That's just a reminder that when you're writing in the chat box, the other person is just kind of experiencing empty space, and it's easier. So it might be easier to type in the article, the title, send it. Type in the main point, send it. Type in another main point, send it. So don't wait until you get to the end of your thought thread to send. Send things in little bits as you go through, and that will keep the other person more engaged. It'll seem more like a conversation than like you're waiting for a novel to be delivered by email. So let me show you the pairings now. And We'd like Dawn to select Denise and Denise to select Dawn in the drop-down menu from the chat box. Gabby and Jane, Kelly and Lisa, Louise and Ruslan, Simon and Tom, and Dee, if you will communicate with Latifa and I, because Shabana is not with us this afternoon. Again, we're going to go back to the question, so we'll show you the question again.
Oops, okay.
Yep. And if you could, when you are done, can you please raise your hand up at the top? And that's when we'll know that all the groups have completed the task. You'll also be able to see when other people are finishing, so that will be a prompt for you that it could be time to kind of move along a little bit more quickly. When we did this last time, people commented that they didn't think that we'd allowed enough time. So for today, this is really a big part of our online session, and we'd like to give you between 10 and 15 minutes, depending on how much time you would like for this task. So again, go ahead and begin. If you have questions, if you need help, raise your hand, type in the chat box. We're still on the poll. Just a moment, we're trying to correct something. Ruslan is indicating that maybe we haven't moved on. Oh, it says poll in progress.
So sorry about that. Okay. Right.
So let's go back
Yeah.
a couple of slides. Yep.
Parents.
Apologies for that. So let's go back and look at the question. I'll go back one more time. And again, we'd like you to discuss one of the articles you summarized for your annotated bibliography. That was in Learning Log 4.1. What was the title? What were the main points? How does it relate to your research question? The pairings for this activity: Dawn and Denise, Gabby and Jane, Kelly and Lisa, Louise and Ruslan, Simon and Tom, and Dee, if you will connect with Latifa and I. So connect to Latifa in your chat box. Again, here's the question, just as a reminder. And when you're done, please raise your hand.
Okay. Right, so 15 minutes or less, depending on how quickly people raise their hands. Okay.
So there's Dee. Can we turn off our Hi, everybody. We're back. I apologize in advance if I am cutting anyone's conversation a little bit short. I know that Gabby and Jane had not yet raised their hands, so I don't know if they were done. But if we could, I'd like to kind of move along at this stage. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of a break from kind of thinking and writing in the chat box. And I have a very short video in just a moment. And this is just a brief overview on writing a thematic literature review. Now, again, I know that as part of this online course that you're not going to be writing the literature review. But again, this short video talks about the process and the structure of that review. So we're going to go ahead and start it. If you have any problems with the sound or with seeing the video actually as a moving video, please let us know immediately.
Hello again, it's Anne. And you've finished your annotated bibliography, so now it's time to write your thematic literature review. So the purposes of going into the literature, and the purpose of the literature in general, is that knowing what other people have done helps you map and define your research topic. You may already have discovered that you're thinking a little differently about your project, or thinking a little bit differently about what your foundations might be. It helps you present a balanced view. You may have a particular idea about what you think your project should be or how it will go. By going into literature, you may have discovered that there are other alternatives, and this is the way you present those alternatives. It can also help justify your research question. You may find things that support what you're already thinking. It allows you to keep up to date with what's currently in the field. It provides literature for you to compare your findings to at the end of your study, and it allows you to emphasize the credibility of your own.
Okay, it looks like you're not seeing very much. So I've had Dee and Kelly both saying that should we be seeing a PowerPoint slide? Yes, basically it's a short slide presentation within this presentation that you should be seeing.
So you should be hearing the narrator speak, and you should be seeing the slides change. Can you confirm if you are actually seeing that? Yep, so Louise is sitting it. Yep.
Oh, okay, so Lisa can. Right, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'll just continue now.
Experiences. So what is this thing called the thematic literature review? You're going to focus on a specific topic, which is, in your case, is the focus of your study. You compile the research that has been published by scholars or experts, and it provides the background for the problem and puts the problem into historical perspective. The thematic literature review also informs the reader about the current concepts and state of research on the topic and controversies that are endemic. It organizes the citations thematically, and what you get is you move from your annotated bibliography into something that is a narrative and a big piece of your paper. So what a review of the literature is not is a thesis paper. It's not another form of an annotated bibliography. It's not suggestions for further reading, and it's not a collection of quotes or paraphrasings from other sources. Your thematic literature review allows you to discuss your sources in terms of the themes or topics that they cover. It forces you to summarize your sources, and grouping them thematically enables you to demonstrate the types of topics that are important to your research and your study. When you write your thematic literature review, you can group things according to terms, theories, arguments, disagreements, or methods. Make sure you understand what you've read. Do not use a piece of literature, a source, a reference, if you do not understand it. So how do I take those annotated bibliography pieces and turn them into a thematic literature review? Well, the first thing I have to do is sort of map my concepts. If I have 5 to 10 primary sources, those are your annotated bibliography pieces, you should have 2 to 6 major themes. I'll show you a visual of what that looks like. So on the left-hand column are my 6 sources. These are the 6 pieces I have in my annotated bibliography. And as I'm reading source 1, it seems to have theme A. And then as I'm reading the second article I have, it has different themes, but there are kind of 2 things going on in that article, theme B and C. I go back and I look at my third article again, And it kind of addresses that A theme again that I found in source 1, and that B theme or concepts or ideas that I found in source 2. And so on. Source 4, I discovered, covers A, B, and C. Source 5 covers maybe idea C, and then source 6 covers the source C again, but it has a new theme, D, that I hadn't come across before. So this is a visual of the source on the left and the theme on the right. I take the next step because what I really want to talk about is themes, not sources. So then I flip it. I discovered that I had 4 themes. So I'm going to put them on the left. I have theme A, B, C, and D. And then I have my source citations. And you notice that some of my citations may repeat. I might talk about Article 3 more than once. I might talk about Article 2 more than once. And that's okay. That's why it's thematically arranged. So I determined that I have 4 themes: the nature of the problem, the findings on best practices, the use of reinforcement, and teacher modeling. And for each of these 4 ideas, I have different citations that I can use, different references I can make, different pieces of literature to which I refer. So when I write my thematic literature review, I may have 4 paragraphs, 4 large paragraphs in my entire literature review section. And the first one would talk about the nature of the problem. The second paragraph would talk about best practices around this problem. The third paragraph would talk about the use of reinforcement, and the fourth paragraph would talk about teacher modeling. In that first paragraph on the nature of the problem, I'm going to cite my source 1, my source 3, and my source 4. In my second paragraph, when I'm talking about best practices around this problem, I'm going to cite source 2, source 3, and source 4 again, and so on. And so you might be a little repetitive, but you're going to talk about different aspects of those sources as you go through. And you can see how this is much more narrative than your annotated bibliography. But most of the writing you've already done in that annotated bibliography. Just sort of have to rewrite it now so it's more of a narrative format. So I have these 4 themes that emerged from my review of the literature: the nature of the problem, the review of best practices in addressing the issue, the use of reinforcement as a specific intervention strategy, and teacher modeling as an intervention strategy. For example, yours will be different. Once you have your themes, organize them in a way that makes sense to your project. What should come first and what should come last? Make sure the order makes sense and flows, and then share with a colleague and get feedback. You're well on your way to writing your classroom research project paper.
All right, I just want to quickly summarize that very, very short video and take what she's presented in a very condensed form and show it to you in an even more condensed form. And I'm going to focus on the 3 parts of a literature review. Before I do that, I should note that sometimes there are occasions when a researcher may produce a literature review as a standalone piece of work. In those situations, a researcher would typically be looking at dozens of different pieces of research evidence and not necessarily this small hand-selected cross-section of pieces that you've picked to support a specific research question. And so when we're talking about a literature review in this context, I just wanted to confirm that we're actually talking about the type of literature review which would appear at the beginning of a research paper or a research report that is addressing a specific focused research question. The first section is the introduction. The introduction literally is 1 or 2 sentences that provide context. The next section are the body paragraphs, and the body paragraphs include a range of information and address a full range of topics, and among those would be historic background to your research question. There are occasions when you will refer back to very kind of early beginnings of the research question you're looking at. So it's not uncommon that someone would refer back to the work of Dewey, for example. But you also want to balance that with a look at recent developments. So if you are going to include a little bit of historic background or context, you want to focus even more on the work that's being done currently. You want to look at both areas of controversy and areas of agreement. It's very important, again, when you're doing the literature review, that you don't simply look for articles that reinforce your particular point of view or what you think is going to happen in that particular piece of research. You want to the extent that you can, reveal studies that other people have done, which may challenge what you think is going to happen in your piece of research. But you want to do that in a very, very balanced way, and you actually want to note, you need to do a little bit of analysis and actually then talk about what the dominant views are regarding that particular topic or that particular research question. But you do, again, you want varying approaches or perspectives, and when possible, you want to be looking at qualitative comparisons. So you don't necessarily want to be looking at areas of disagreement where people simply have levels of disagreement. You want to actually try to find studies that might be actually backed up by qualitative data so that you can make more informed decisions as to what is or is not the dominant view. The third part of the literature review is the conclusion. And in the conclusion, you simply summarize the major issues and you establish where your research fits in to the background literature. You can see that the body paragraphs, and again, the body paragraphs tend to be around 2 to 4 paragraphs that are kind of sandwiched between the introduction, which is quite brief, and the conclusion, which is also quite brief. I'm going to move on now to the case study that we first introduced in session 3 and which I had asked you to take a look at again in session 4. If you have that or have access to that, could you either pull that up on your screen or pull it out if you have it as a paper copy? And we want to look at, I want you to look at these 3 different parts of the literature review. And as it turns out, in the case study that I've given you, that the literature review or the things that would resemble the literature review appear on pages 1 through 3. So we're only talking about the first 3 pages of the article, How Does Talk Around Reading Influence Comprehension in 3rd grade? And what I was hoping one of you would be willing to do is to paraphrase the introduction or just talk about what some of the points are in the introduction. And Simon looks like he has his hand up right now. And again, if your hand is not up, please put your hand down from the previous activity. But we're going to open up to Simon.
Okay, Simon. Oh. So, Simon, you need to unmute your microphone. Okay. Okay.
Hi. I'm up by accident because I'm not sure how to software.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Sorry, I didn't have my hand was up for no good reason because I pressed it by mistake.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Apologies.
Oh, sorry. Is it still saying something? Sorry, I'm muted. Okay, he's muted. Right, so back to the question. Would someone like to paraphrase the introduction? Please raise your hand.
Yep. Or again, just tell us some of the things that you notice the author has included in the introduction. Again, as a hint, if you're trying to decide which part of that is the introduction, it really should be like the very first paragraph.
Okay, so we've got some hands up. So we've got Jane. Okay, Jane, go ahead.
Okay, well, I suppose like all introductions, it sort of sets the scene, and in this particular author's case, she's setting the scene of how she came to the problem. I think that's basically the context of the study is the introductory part. Do you want more than that, or are you?
That's great. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yes, I think that Dee has her hand up as well.
Okay, go ahead, Dee.
Thank you. I just think the first 2 lines where it says reading comprehension lies at the heart, she really establishes the context and the guiding concept on which she even identified the problem for her, and or based the problem that she identified, and then looked to then do the research.
Great, thank you for that. And again, Jane's response and your response essentially are pointing out the fact that in this particular introduction, the author has provided a little bit of personal professional context. She has kind of stated what her professional interests are. And in that very first line, she has actually kind of written down in a very brief form, her kind of assumption and a hypothesis in going forward with this piece. I want to now kind of shift your attention to the body of the piece. And one of the things that we talked about that I mentioned in the last slide is that often in the body, you are seeing the author is bringing forward or pointing out key historical information as well as recent developments. And I was wondering if someone could point out from that and pick out some of the pieces of what would actually qualify as historical background. So if you were to look at that article and say, right, this particular reference that they've cited, I would definitely say is historic background rather than recent developments. Which of those things constitute historic background? And again, if you'd raise your hand and we'll call on you, please.
Right, Denise, thank you.
Hi. Well, she does mention at some point about Vygotsky's theories. I believe it's page 3, when she goes into his social learning theory and what it says about scaffolding and how it relates to her reading, to what she's trying to identify.
That's great. And in this case, someone like Vygotsky, who was writing in the mid-1970s, sometimes when a writer or when a researcher is looking at historic background, they will go all the way back to the early 1900s. In this case, the historic background is set in the context of the 1970s. So Denise, thank you very much for that. I wanted to point that out because when we say historic, I want you to keep in mind the historic is relevant, and it's relevant to the topic that you're writing about. If you're writing about a topic which has only currently kind of emerged into kind of the consciousness of researchers and education professionals, it's very possible that it may not have kind of a historic root that goes back into the beginnings of the educational movement, but in fact may be rooted in more recent events and ideas. Yeah. So moving on to our next question, I was wondering if, again, in the body piece, if you could find some pieces of some sources that actually are sources that indicate levels of agreement. Oh, I'm sorry, controversy or agreement. I should actually reframe that. I mean, I know that some of you may not have read this just today, but I was wondering if in this, if anyone who's looked at it could see any sources that dealt with disagreement or controversy rather than agreement. Again, what our tendency is in writing literature reviews is to find a lot of information that agrees with our particular hypothesis or our point of view or the thing that we're going to find out. And did anyone find any evidence in this piece of literature that was cited that disagrees with or challenges the author's position? Denise, go ahead, please.
Well, I don't know if this is what you're getting at, but I'm looking the paragraph before the method part. It talks a lot about different theories and what they have talked, I mean, how they view this type of activity with the metacognitive and then social constructivists, and the proponents of collaborative learning argue some things. So she sort of brings up, but not specifically, I guess, studies. She just says that there's, different theories about this type of activity.
Yep. Do you think, I mean, just generally though, did those studies seem to be controversial? I mean, did the studies essentially fundamentally disagree with one another, or were they all kind of saying the same thing, or in general agreement? I mean,
it seemed to be, I mean, she comes to the conclusion that she wants to clarify how discourse, the last sentence, with peers during partner reading influences understanding, but I think she draws from, I guess she wants to have a more focused or pinpoint exactly what it's aiming at, but she brings forth these theories that seem to be pointing towards the same thing.
Yep.
That it's important that there is that partnership and that collaboration.
Great, thank you for that. It's interesting, when I had read through this article, of course, as you know, that the content for this course is coming from our Harvard Graduate School of Education partners, and they had selected the case study and they have designed the questions that we're discussing right now. And as I read through the piece, I was hard pressed to actually find any real controversy in the opening parts. One of the things to keep in mind when you're reading a piece of published research like this, and this piece of research does come from a peer-reviewed journal, is that it is very possible that there are some areas of educational research where there's general agreement, and you're not going to necessarily find that kind of hard-edge controversy that you would find in other topics. And again, that doesn't mean that you are wrong or that perhaps you just haven't looked hard enough. If the general consensus and the dominant views all point in a very similar direction, then in fact, you're not going to be able to address that level of controversy within your literature review. So again, even though you want to look for that, you want to make certain that what you represent is actually accurate and it accurately represents what other researchers have found. The very last thing that I want to point out about this case study has to do with its organization. We've just been talking more about the sources and whether or not the sources are historic or recent or whether they're controversial or in agreement. But the organization of the body paragraphs are by themes. And the themes that this particular author has picked, the first theme has to do with best practices. She then moves on to metacognitive theory and reading. She then goes on to social learning, and she ends with a number of different pieces around transactional comprehension. And again, as you get more practiced at reading research articles, one of the really useful things is to not just read through the piece, but to actually think about what the theme is that is the focus of each of those paragraphs in the body. And that will help you write that annotated bibliography, which will then feed in to the literature review. Let's go on to So I want to go directly on to this next chat question and ask you about how you think you're going to use what you learned about finding academic articles and writing a literature review. I know, again, that some of you have projects in mind. Some of you may not be planning to do an actual research project as part of this course. But how will you use what you just learned about finding academic articles? Again, if you could go ahead and type it into the chat box, please.
These responded saying it will help me keep track of articles I find that are relevant and that I want to use. Yeah. Ruslan saying the idea of concept mind is new to me. It provides very good structure for the process. The process of analysing literature. Kelly has relearned that it takes a while to find the right information and making a list of keywords and related terms at the start, clicking on subject headings within articles and following the trail of sources from bibliography of articles can also help. Yeah, I think this is something that Ben mentioned last week as well. Lisa is trying to read articles more often to help inform her practice. And the first thing that Jane will do is examine the recent articles, the recent literature review that she has just helped to commission for the NLE project to see if she can identify correctly the part discussed here. Good practice for me, yeah. And Tom is saying that one of his sources is almost identical to the topic, and through reading the literature review in that article, he was exposed to new sources and the aspects of flipped learning that he will need to know about. Here's again, one article can lead to other sources. And Gabby is saying, I will read more relevant articles that I hope will help me with my project. Thank you.
So before we close today, as we close every time, I just want to kind of ask if you have any questions about anything that we've done so far, from session 1 to session 4. And if you could either raise your hand if you'd like to ask your question, or if you'd like to simply write it into the chat box, go ahead and record it there at this time. Again, if these are questions we can answer quickly and easily, we'll do that during the session. If there are things that we need to do some further investigation on ourselves, we'll do that and answer following the session.
Okay, doesn't look like there are any questions. Oh, okay, okay. So Dawn's got a question in the first poll that we did. Did you mention a source for research? And it was Eric and IC. What is IC? Oh, it was IOE. It's the Institute of Education. So it'll be just part of the University of London.
Yep, the IOE tool is the one that Latifa demoed last week. And it is one, as part of our membership in the Research and Development Network, we have access to the Institute of Education libraries. And if you'd like to learn more about that, please contact Latifa and we can tell you everything you need to know about accessing that resource.
Yeah, I will send out the link and the login details again. Is there possible funding if you want to research with ACS? Oh, if you want to conduct research with ACS, Louise, then SIM is the place to come. You can submit a project proposals for the 2015-16 academic year are due on the 15th of April. So feel free to contact us. We're happy to discuss any ideas you may have.
Yep. There may also be opportunities to do research at the campus level if it relates to things that your campus is concerned about. But right now, the kind of the easiest, most direct, most obvious route is working through SIM.
Yes. Okay, so just moving on. Oh, so just one last question from Jane. Will you let us know when the link? Yes, I will let you know, yes. As soon as we've got all the details from the IOE for the pieces that didn't work quite so well last week, I will let you know. Okay, so again, just before we close out, just to remind you, there will be a checkout survey for this session. So if you could complete it and send me an email to confirm that you've completed it, and then I can then send you on the session 5 information. So bearing in mind that the UK schools break for spring break this coming Friday, please try and complete your checkout survey before you leave for your break. Also, the session 5 information, because we're working in partnership with Harvard, we won't actually receive until next week. So if you keep an eye out for it during your break, you will receive it before the end of next week, the 3rd of April at the very latest. So unfortunately, we haven't got the materials yet to send it out immediately after you send me the checkout survey.
And if I could just add, I want to thank everyone for your help with those checkout surveys. I know that they seem repetitive. We are using the same survey at the end of every session, but they're really useful for us, especially the written comments that you're providing, because it actually is shaping the way that we prepare for and present the sessions. We are going to be doing kind of a mid-course review with Harvard soon. And we'll be looking at all of we'll be looking at everything that you wrote as part of those exit surveys. So thank you very much for that.
Okay. Also, just remind you that there is another learning log for this session, learning log 4.2. So if you'd like to record your learning points from this session, this is for your records only. So it's a reference material for yourself. We're not going to ask to look at it, so it's really for your own use.
And just as a kind of a preview into the next session, we know that we're not going to give you a huge amount of preparation time. We know that it is your break, and so we are designing that session so that it does not have quite as much work in preparation to do as we have for the other sessions. However, if you need to use that time to catch up with things that you haven't found time to do for sessions 1 through 4, please do that. Again, one of the key things as we go into the last set of sessions is to be certain that you have a research question that you're happy with, even if you're not going to actually carry out that piece of research, because all of the other things that we do now will hinge on that research question. That's going to be your touchstone. So I want you to be certain that you're really happy with where that is before we go into session 4.
Okay, so finally, thank you very much for attending this session. Session 5 will be after the break, so that'll be on Tuesday the 14th of April at 3:30.
Yep. If you have any questions in between, Latifa and I are both here over most of the break, so if you do send us an email, if you decide to do something, we will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thank you again for joining us today. Have a good break, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes, thank you very much. The recording of the session will be posted, and I'll send a link out to that as soon as I can. Thank you. Bye.